Okay, welcome to the first tutorial for the DraftSite CAD Drawing program. The goal of today's tutorial will be to replicate a resolution test chart, such as this famous one, the 1951 US Air Force resolution test chart. And the purpose of this is to determine the resolution of anything that's printed or scanned or imaged. And what you see is a number of line pairs, these horizontal and vertical bars. They have well-defined dimensions, and they get smaller and smaller as you go down. And the idea is you can just simply look and see, well, which group and which number corresponds to the smallest feature that can be well resolved. And you can then look at the chart here. We have an equation that relates the line pairs per millimeter according to this log scale, 2 to the group number plus element minus 1 divided by 6. And here's a table from Wikipedia that relates the actual micron dimensions. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this in DraftSite. So let's move over to a DraftSite program. And when we start up, we have an empty blank page and a few things we need to do before we begin. The first is to go into format the unit system. We want to tell it that we're going to use millimeters. And we do that down here. It says block units format inches. Change that to millimeters. 4 digits of precision is good. So we can apply that and check OK. And the next thing we want to do is define, we want to turn on a grid. And what you see here is we have now some dots that tell us where we are, give us some dimension. Typically these are spaced 1 millimeter apart. We can actually define that by typing grid, and it will tell us the default. Actually, if you see down here, it's 0.5 units of spacing, and that's okay. So we'll just hit escape, and that cancels any operation. And notice our working space is rather small. Since we changed to millimeters, we should make our workspace quite a bit larger. And we can do that by formatting the drawing boundary. If we click that, you see at the bottom it specifies the lower left-hand corner. 0, 0 is a good start for that. And the other dimension now, here you see the default was 12 by 9. Here let's make it a lot larger. We'll typically be using 12 by 10 inch sheets of transparency film. And that corresponds to 304.8 by 254 millimeters. So hit enter, and now you see that our workspace has gotten much bigger. Now as you see, I'm using my scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And if you push down the scroll wheel in the center, you get a hand, which lets you pan around and navigate that way. Okay, so remember our goal is to create the test pattern. And each set of bars corresponds to the dimensions of 5 units wide and 1 unit tall. So we can create that by selecting the rectangle tool up on the left here. And remember we have units that are now spaced, these grids are spaced 0.5 units apart. We can click down at the bottom to this button called Snap, and now you'll see that we only are selecting each of those spots. We're snapping to one of those grid points. So let's draw a 1 by 5 unit bar. This will be a 1 millimeter by 5 millimeter bar. Let's just click anywhere for now. And as you see on the bottom, we can either specify a opposite corner, or we have a couple other options. If we select D and enter, we can now type in the dimensions. Since we know it's 5 by 1, this is an easier way to do things. So let's type 5 and enter for the horizontal dimension, 1 and enter. And you see here we have our 5 by 1 element. Okay, let's make some more of these. Again, if we look back at our test pattern, you can see they're 5 units wide and they're spaced with about 1 millimeter spacing, or 1 unit spacing. And that gives us a 5 by 5 square. Okay, so let's copy this. We can do that in a couple of ways. We can type the word copy and enter. It then asks for a start point. Let's take the bottom corner, left click once, and now you can see we can move this copy unit anywhere we want. So let's do 1 millimeter apart. Again, that's 2 grid units. And we can left click once, left click twice, and then hit escape to end this command. Okay, so we've got one set of 3. We can now select all of these. We could copy again by typing copy, or if you look at the right side, we have at the very top here this icon copy. Click that, does the same thing. And here what we want to do is we want to copy these 3 bars just over here to the right. Let's click the bottom corner again, and we'll space them apart by 2 millimeters. Again, that's 4 grid units. Okay, and now hit escape again to end the command. Now we'd like to rotate these on the right. So we can choose the rotate command. We could type rotate or click the icon right here, rotate. We need to choose the pivot point, which will be in the center of the middle bar. And let's make a vertical line, and we're done. Now hit escape again to complete that command. Okay, let's move it to the side. And now let's label it with a number. We can do this by making a simple note. That's this icon on the left. It asks us for a position. Let's just go 1 millimeter away. Click once. Our height will be 5 millimeters. And the text angle will be 0 for horizontal. And we'll just hit 1. Now click somewhere else on the screen, and then escape, and we're done. So this is our basic unit, our basic test pattern. If we select the whole thing, we can group it together into what's called a block. So you might be used to grouping in PowerPoint. In CAD drawings, they're called blocks. And that's this icon over here, make block. Let's click that. It asks us for a name. Let's just call it target 1, and OK. Now you notice if you click on it, everything is selected together. Okay, so now we need to make a group of 6. Now one way we can do that is we can select our block. We can then pattern it using this icon on the right. Here, as you can see, we can make an array of different dimensions. This is a 4x4 by default. It can be circular. Here, let's just make a row of 6 in the vertical dimension, 6 by 1. And remember, we've got 5 millimeters of vertical dimension. Let's space them by 2 millimeters again. So our vertical axis spacing will be 7 millimeters. So hit OK. And now you see we have 6 copies. Okay. Now we need to start scaling them. So let's learn how to use the scale command. Let's first select the bottom 5. And what we want to do is we want to scale them around the upper left corner as shown right here. So we use the scale command. That is this one right here. And you can also type the word scale. Click this corner as your reference point, your base point. And now you can see we can scale it by any dimension. You want it to be slightly smaller, actually by the factor of 2 to the minus 1/6 power. It turns out that is equal to 0.8909. And then hit enter. Now we've scaled all the 5 beneath. Okay, let's try that again. And selecting only the bottom 4. Okay, here I'll type scale this time just to show you can do that as well. Sometimes it's easier. Now we want to select our base point. And what you notice is now we're snapping to the grid, but our corner is not actually on a grid point. So now we want to remove or turn off the snap. We have something called eSnap on, which will snap onto any feature of an existing element. So like this corner, for example. We click on that. Again, 0.8909 is our scale factor, and there we go. Try that one more time. Scale, click this corner, 0.8909, enter, and we'll do this 2 more times. Scale, 0.8909, 0.8909. Okay. Now let's change our numbers. If you remember from our pattern, we've got numbers 1 through 6. They get smaller as the numbers get larger. So let's select these numbers and change them. We notice that these are now all blocks. They're all locked together, and we can eliminate that by using the explode command. It's this little bomb in the corner. We click that once, and now we've got individual elements again. So hit escape to clear anything selected. Let's double click on this, and now we can hit 2. Then click here, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now, it turns out that to make this pattern, one thing that's really convenient is to make a rectangle to give us some dimensions here. And the rectangle should start at this corner up here, in the upper left corner, or upper right corner, and it should be 28 millimeters wide and 24 millimeters tall. So again, we have the option to make a rectangle, and we can specify the dimensions. So let's type D and then enter. And by default, positive values are to the left and upwards. Here we want to go to the, backwards again. Positive would be to the right and upwards. We want to go to the left and downwards, so we'll use negative values for both. So minus 28 millimeters horizontal, minus 24 millimeters vertical. Okay. Now the next thing we'd like to do is mirror this pattern, the group of all 6, across the midline of this new rectangle. So one thing to notice is you can select 2 different ways. If you select going down or to the right, you see a blue box. And if you go to the left, you see a green box. So green boxes are inclusive. If you touch any part of an element, it will be selected. Here, for example, we'll select all the bars in the first group, 1, and the large rectangle. If we did that the other way around, now we're doing it inclusively, so that since we're not completely selecting that outer rectangle, the large rectangle, it won't be selected. So this is kind of useful. In this case, to select only the group, we can do this blue box selection. And let's try out the mirror command. That is this icon at the upper right. Mirror. It asks you for a start point of the mirror line. And let's use the center of this box as the mirror line. Notice as I get close to the midpoint, you see this triangle appear, and a label that says midpoint. If I get to a corner, it will say endpoint, and put down a little marker. So here, for example, we want to go from the midpoint to the bottom midpoint. And now it asks, do we want to delete our source, the initial one? And no, we want to just copy it. So we'll say no, and enter. And our 1 is kind of misaligned, so let's move that around. We can grab onto this blue element, this blue square, and move it around. And if we want to go orthogonally, meaning either just vertical or just horizontal, we can hold down the Shift command. And now you see we are constrained to either vertical or horizontal. Okay. So we move it out of the way, click, left click, and we're done. Okay. Now what we'd like to do is take the right hand group and scale it by 50%. I'll type scale, I'll click on the upper corner, and type 0.5. Okay, that looks good. Now, the next thing we want to do is take the first group up here and actually move it down to the bottom right corner. So we can type the move command. We can actually just hit M as a shorthand, or on the upper right, here you see the move icon. So if we just type M, we can select a point. Here I'll select this lower right corner, and I will bring it down to the large box's lower right corner. Now let's move this number 1 again, and we'll hit Shift to constrain it once again. Alright, and now let's take the rest of these, move them up a little bit. Again, M, Enter. And, whoops, looks like I still was selecting that number 1 over here. Let's bring that back to where we started. Okay, so we're beginning to get close to our desired element. There's one more piece. It's kind of a minor thing. It's a square with the same dimensions as this group of 3 at the bottom. So let's just make a square. We can snap to these corners. And we're done there. Now let's select that and move it. And here we're going to move the corner to the center of our large rectangle. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this so far. This is now one cycle of this pattern. Let's select everything, except for the large rectangle. We can unselect it by holding down Shift and clicking once again. Actually, before we do this, let's add our group labels. So let's do this by copying our number 1 down here and moving it up to the top. Escape to end that command. We'll do another one here for our right group. And it turns out that this group is actually, well, we have 1 millimeter bar, or 1000 microns, that's group -1. And the next smaller, it's 1/2 scale, is going to be group 0. Okay, so now we have everything we need for one cycle of our test pattern. Again, we want to select all of these except for the large rectangle. I'm going to shift click on that one. And now let's make another block. This one will be target 2. Again, now we select that whole thing together. Now here comes the really cool part. We're going to scale this down very, very small. We're going to type copy. We're going to choose the bottom corner. And what we're going to do is we're going to, oops, didn't want to do that. I accidentally clicked the button. We can undo that by typing U and Enter. What I wanted to do was actually pan everything over. And what I'm looking for is I want to have this, my selection point, I want it to be in line with our square. Again, I hover for a moment till it says endpoint. And you see it's got a plus there. So now I have a construction line. And you see, if you see when I get in line with it, I see a vertical line that I can snap to. Let's do the same on the 4th group. And now I've got 2 construction lines and I can click on their intersection. And I'm perfectly aligned with some of these elements. I'm going to hit escape since I only want to copy this once. Now what I would like to do is scale this. We'll choose that same corner, lower left corner. Now I've got 2 cycles here. Remember, each cycle scales by a factor of 0.5, so squared will be 0.25. So here we've got our next smaller cycle, fully embedded within the first one. So we can zoom in. It's almost like a fractal now. We can zoom in, select that one, copy it, do the same thing. We select our entity, hit enter to say that we're done selecting entities, click on our corner, and set up our construction lines, hover over this corner, hover over this corner, move to their intersection, click, and then escape. Click this again, scale 0.25, and again, now you see you've got 3 cycles. And we're going to do 2 more of these. Click, copy, scale 0.25, enter, copy. Again, you have to hover for a moment. See here I didn't actually get my plus. I was a little bit too fast. Let's hover over it. There, now I've got the plus. I lay down my marker, and now I can find the intersection. Scale, click, 0.25. Okay, so now I've got my test pattern, and let's make sure that we've done everything properly. Let's first start by selecting the whole thing. Before we go on, let's make a copy of our block. We'll just copy it. I'm going to hit D for displacement, and I'm just going to send it off to the left by -50 by 0. Okay. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take everything and explode it. Bang. Okay, so now I should have individual numbers I can go through. I need to change these numbers. This is now group 1, group 2, group 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's far enough. If we go back to our pattern here, if we look, remember we started with -1, which was 1,000 microns, or 1 millimeter, and we've gone down to group 8 and element 6. That's now 1.1 microns. Now there's most likely no way that we'll actually resolve down to that with a mask printer. So there's no reason to go any lower than that. In fact, we may not be able to see much in group 6 or 7 either. But this will be a good test for us. Okay, so if we go back to our drawing, remember we can actually make sure that everything is done correctly. We can take a look at some dimensions. We can do that by using a tool called inquiry and get distance. That allows us to pick 2 points, and it will tell us the distance between them. So here, let's snap onto the width here, 0.1 and 0.2. Oops, that didn't work. Let's try this again. Tools, inquiry, get distance, 1 corner, 2nd corner. Now at the bottom you see delta x equals 1.000 millimeters. Okay, that's good. Now if we go to group 8, oops, we never change this number, 8. Okay, so again, the dimensions here should be actually 1 micron. Let's see if that's true. We go tools, inquiry, get distance, and here you go, 0.0011 millimeters or 1.1 microns. Okay, so that's good. We have everything that we want. The one thing that we're missing is that these, remember for the printer, what we need is a series of closed polylines. If we select all of our elements here, we can look at the properties bar and see that we have 439 elements. If we drop down here, we see that 70 of them are simple notes, or the text. 4 of them are lines and 4 are polylines. If we click on the polylines, we can just look at their properties. And the thing that's most important is to look under MISC. And this feature down here tells us whether or not the polylines are closed. And here it says yes. That's good. So all of the rectangles are closed polylines, and that's what we need. But we need to convert the text into polylines as well. So the way we can do that, we have everything selected. We type the command explode text, all one word, and enter. And now you see that we have an outline for each of these numbers. If we select these again, now we see that we've got a couple other things. We have 2D polylines. If we click on them, you see they're all closed, and those are the numbers and all the numbers. The line, 4 elements of a line, those are actually they are the large rectangles, which we don't really need anymore. That was mostly what they're designed to. So let's delete these 4 lines. Now we're left with our test pattern that is just a 2-dimensional polyline, again all closed, and a regular polyline, also all closed. So we're done. We've created our test pattern, and this should be printable. We can again make a block out of this and say 1951 USAF. Okay, and there we have it. We have a nice test pattern that we can use to actually test the printer that will print our footer masks later in the course. Alright, that's it for now.